Great. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me and we're all here. Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, Games to Change 2021, back in its sort of virtual home. And welcome to the XR and Play Mapping the New Play Space Roundtable. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're live from, I think, London, California, New York, Austin. That's all covered? I think. Yeah, nods all around. Okay, so today we're going to dive into the possibilities for play which are being enabled by this rapidly evolving technological landscape. My name is Phil Stewart. I'm the creative director and founder of Preloaded. We're an immersive game studio based in London. Long-time friend of Games to Change, and really pleased to be here today. Thanks, Susanna and Jesse, for inviting me. And I've brought together some truly brilliant thinkers and doers who are helping to shape this incredible space. And we've done really well. So we've got people from expertise from AAA games, theme parks, mixed reality headsets, mixed reality software, connected toys, location-based play. We've kind of got all our bases covered. So let me kind of introduce you all very briefly. We have Kelly from Disney Parks. Welcome, Kelly. We have Val from Live Area and Collabsco. Hey, Val. We have Brian from Lego Creative Play Lab. Hey, Brian. And we have Ebby from niantic Labs, and also Ali as well. Hey, Ali.
Hey.
Cool. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let me explain briefly the format for, I mean, you guys know, but I'll explain briefly to everyone else who is watching. So we have just under 50 minutes, and I'm going to take 10 minutes just to set some context and introduce this incredible possibility space that we're going to be talking about today. And then I'm going to hand to each of the roundtable people with a question, and we're just going to see where the conversation goes. Like, it's going to be quite loose. Really importantly, and this is kind of my job, really want to make sure we have some time at the end of this process for the audience to contribute some questions. So please use, I know there's loads of stuff like on the right-hand side that you guys would have seen. You can kind of put things in there. There's a lot of functionality that I need to get my head around, but we'll get there. But yeah, most important thing is put questions in and I will find them, and I will find some time to ask them. Okay, so let's start with some context. So I have a slide. So this roundtable is all about XR and play, and XR is a term that we use a lot, and often we use it hand in hand with the term immersive. But what do we mean by XR, and what do we mean by immersive, and why are we collectively, this roundtable, but the much wider community, so interested in it? Well, put simply, XR and immersive technologies generally have the power to change almost every aspect of our lives, how we live, how we work, how we play. But the breadth of XR and immersive can make it quite intangible in some ways. And I like to think about it simply as new audience possibilities made possible by new types of technology. And I think of these technologies in three core groups. So the first one's computation. And this is an area which is in which specific technologies are helping computers and the devices that we're holding just get smarter. So technologies like artificial intelligence, technologies like computer vision, machine learning, these technologies, or maybe sort of fields of interest, probably more appropriate, are bringing an understanding of our world and ourselves to the machines and devices that we're using every day. The second area is infrastructure. So this refers to the services and networks which are enabling new ways to connect and support immersive technologies. So this is definitely not like a single thing, but many things layered and overlapping. It's the high-speed networks, like the 5G networks that are coming and rolled out, enabling edge and cloud computing, pixel streaming, and new services like blockchain, which are bringing like layers of authentication and commodity to digital experiences. And then the final one is hardware, and this is the stuff that we're holding in our hands, that you're looking at me through, you're wearing or you're using, all the inventions that haven't yet been made. So things like, things that we get excited about kind of coming down the pipe, like, Apple glasses, AR glasses. So the developments in hardware, these developments in hardware are responsible for smaller, better, increasingly surprising ways to kind of hear and touch and experience digital content. And this is the technological landscape which is enabling these future audience possibilities. And it's an evolving space which is enabling new ways to play, and it's evolving every day. Like I know this group knows it, but I'm sure the audience does as well. This space is literally moving every day, and it's such an exciting field to be in right now. But it's the intersection of these technologies and where the really cool stuff's happening. And it's a space in which the world's leading brands and organizations are creating new ways to engage and inspire and educate families and children around the world. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So let's get chatting. So Brian, I'm going to start with you. We first met when you were working at Magic Leap, and I know you've kind of come from a field of like AI, and you then went to like Magic Leap and you're working with like hardware, the biggest hardware startup in the world. And before that, you were working in, AAA games. Now you're at Lego Creative Play Lab, which is this future thinking bit of Lego, which is such an exciting place to be. Tell us about your role there and your approach to XR experiences.
Yeah, so I will say I'm the interaction design director for a very sort of like large secret project at Lego, and I can't say too much about it, but like if you look into my background, you can probably swing some hammers and maybe hit a few corners off of the edges of the table, right? And so the point being is sort of like how I go about XR technology is the same way that I kind of did in my AAA gaming record, which is like I was always about feedback. I was the gameplay and the AI guy, right? And that's sort of like the full loop of feedback. And in both of those cases, a lot of what you're fighting for most of the time is contextual goodness, right? Like I want to get people's context into this lame little controller, or as much humanity as I can wrangle out of a mouse and keyboard. And likewise, on the other side, I want to have a little character that's maybe this big on the screen, feed back information to you in the most human way possible. Even if that little creature isn't a human, it's a vampire space goat, it's still, if it's supposed to be intelligent, it's going to feel a little bit like human intelligence, not vampire space goat intelligence, because nobody really knows what they are thinking. That's one for the ages. And so it's all about context. And the beautiful thing about anytime you take a sensor and mount it to something, if I take a joystick and mount it to a large arcade box, I need to calibrate it to the vibration of the box so that I can like give people a good joystick. And if I mount a sensor to a wall in a theme park, I need to calibrate how dark that room is, or I need to calibrate this or that or the other thing. And if I take a bunch of sensors and mount them to a person, I finally get to that point where like I need to actually calibrate the experience to humanity, and like integration is for me the big word. It goes beyond, I think, immersive. Is integrated, right? Like you're now taking into account the human in a much deeper, much more low level, so that you have understanding of that person, and you can then use that context to feed it into the experience, to feed it into the play. And when you know that much about the person, you can give them a lot more freedom. I think people sometimes worry with XR technology that they're giving up a lot of freedom creatively. The freedom for the person to walk around the room, the freedom for the person to look wherever they want. That's a lot of freedom that they didn't have when they were sitting in their dang chair watching a screen. And yet, if we know as much as we do about people by using these calibrated systems, we now have a lot of free space that we can give them that freedom to do those things and still be able to like engage them in a high real-time feedback system that we understand a lot about them, and we can give them more of what they need in the right place at the right time. The beautiful thing about agency in general, about free will in general, is that like that directly to me goes back to the definition of play, right? And I think for me, play is about having a fun little rule set or a fun little tool set, and then saying, go for it, do what you will, right? And it's a very free experience usually. And I think part of the reason that we associate it with children is because there's no consequences. It's very free, and that they can do whatever the hell they kind of want, and nobody's going to come over and slap the Legos out of their hands or whatever it is, right? Like we're going to let them play. And part of the reason it's still associated with people or kids and not everybody is because of that consequences. We think now that we go into jobs or we go into college that you have to learn consequence, and you have to be a little bit more judgy, and you have to be a little bit less free, and you don't. The beautiful thing about XR technology, the thing that for me it's going to enable as far as change is concerned, is that a lot of real-time feedback systems are now equipped with human understanding context, and much better real-time feedback. And so therefore that playfulness and that ability to experiment and get good feedback so that you can hone in on where you're supposed to be, it doesn't have to just be about play. It can be how we learn. It can be how we work. And we can be a lot more playful in general by having XR technology. And so for me, that's why I'm so excited about the field in general and about like the direction we're going, because I really feel like we have the ability for the first time ever to give back some of the freedom of play that we had when we were kids that got taken away because there wasn't something that knew a lot about us that could like help rein us in once we were no longer children. And now we have a ubiquitous compute that's like somewhat attuned to us and can come along for the ride. And so I'm super excited about the field. And like for me, I spend a lot of my time steering people away from trying to wrest control back and more about trying to learn about all of the different beautiful context of humanity so that people can actually embrace the thing that we have now, this beautiful XR technology ecosystem that involves giving up a little bit of, the lecture so that you get the conversation. And to me, that's the playful part of the entire new medium. And that's why I was super happy that you guys had me on, because I love games for change, meaning that like not only can we help educate people on this medium, but educate people on like what it means to actually play in a productive manner.
Yeah. Well, Brian, it's great to have you here. I think one of the things when I think about Lego is that, and it's interesting, you're American, so you say Legos, but I have to say Lego because I'm English. But
I'm sure I'll get slapped for doing that.
Yeah, sorry to highlight. The thing about Lego is it's always seen as such a kind of like a toy for good. Like it's used in classrooms. It's such a powerful, simple, reductive kind of like play system. And one of the things, and I know it's very difficult for you to talk about the work you're working on now, which I'm sure is incredibly progressive and exciting. But actually, Lego has always been kind of very progressive in the way it's adopted technology. So think about kind of the Apple keynotes of like a few years ago. That's like Lego up there, center stage, using the latest computer vision, and then obviously that added into like things like hidden sides. Lego is a traditional toy, but it's progressive in the way it's adopting new technologies. And I guess that talks like your remit at Lego. And I mean, without I'm not asking you to talk about your projects, but there's something very exciting about knowing that such a traditional organization in many ways is being so progressive in how it might embrace those technologies.
Yeah, for me, it's super exciting because Lego has always been about the physicality. And to me, that's the one thing that sometimes gets dropped on the floor with XR. There's too many buttons floating out in the air still, and not enough touching and physicality. And touch is so fundamental to people, to humans. Like you can say blind, you can say deaf, but we don't even have a word for the lack of touch. You know what I mean? Like it's so fundamental to people that's not a thing that like we even really think about as being potentially absent, and yet like that tends to fall away, right? And so for me, part of the Lego goodness is that they're rooted in that physicality. Yeah,
and we'll probably talk about the kind of the digital physical kind of blurring of worlds, like maybe towards the end. Okay, great, Brian. Thanks. Great to have you here. So, Val, I'm going to move on to you now. So, you work at Live Area, also Collabsco, but many of you will know you from your writing at VR Scout. But they should also know you released the first mapping of the connected play ecosystem way back in 2018. And so you've worked and consulted in this space on some of the most interesting kind of highly progressive stuff that I've certainly seen. So as a thinker and doer in this space, how have you seen things change since 2018? And how do you see like audience expectation? How has audience expectation changed since then? And what is the expectation kind of like looking forward?
Great. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. And I love this question. It's a big question when we think about the past couple of years. And just kind of for clarity for the audience, really when we talk about connected play and in terms of the mapping that we've done in the landscape, it's really looking at those physical digital experiences, not only for AR and VR, but also looking at all different emerging technologies. So just to give a little context there. Now in 2018, kind of focusing in mainly on obviously an XR perspective today, In 2018, we saw a lot of what I call portfolio power. So Brian, although you weren't at Lego at the time, Lego was definitely, proud and definitely represented there in the AR space for sure. Lego as well as Hasbro were our top leaders from kind of big toy, followed by Mattel and Spin Master. But it was also interesting at that time, we had sort of what I called fierce and focused, excuse me. So those are companies like Merge and their XR ecosystem. I was really fortunate to have worked with Merge for some time across all their products, and such a great brand in terms of having the VR and AR goggles for sort of kids and families 10 plus, the Merge Cube, as well as their content platform, which is exciting because they continue to grow today. So from 2018 today, and continue to grow and be an innovator in the space. Also, at that companies like I Am in Play, who had Dino Mundi. So kind of bringing it way back, they were doing AR and VR back in 2010 and continue to do experiences even in LBE today. And then I can't leave sort of 2018 and fast forward ahead without talking about Sensible Object, who were acquired by Niantic. So they were doing a ton of great stuff and continue to, with Beast of Balance, and having that kind of scan and play, and then evolving that product to have a little bit of an AR fun to it. So then we sort of fast forward, right, to 2019. And when we mapped and looked at the landscape, then guess what AR did? I think everybody here will be excited and probably know that it skyrocketed. It was our number one category that we mapped. I believe it was 118% increase in terms of sort of physical digital toy and game products, just in 1 year. So yeah, and then also from a VR standpoint, we started seeing more toys, not necessarily from the big toy companies, but more independents experimenting with their own kind of VR headset and supporting content at that time. And then let's see, also kind of, this is where it gets good for Niantic again, because in 2019, one of the big trends we saw and actually continue to see when we talk about now in the future is really about getting kids and families up and moving. So as we all saw, and we continue to see, again, Pokemon Go just like climbing across the world. And we were seeing other experiences at that time, like Dragon Quest, Harry Potter, Wizards Unite, Jurassic World Alive, kind of getting people moving. And then other interesting things. And Phil, what I think might be, you may know them, but there was Play Biba, and they were all about kind of extending, having augmented reality experiences in parks. So just kind of like playscapes in parks and having AR experiences. And then also augmented board games was sort of like a big deal, right? So you're looking at things like Mattel having Pictionary Air. There's a teeny tiny, really great company down in Uruguay called Unicorn Games, and they had a board game called The Explorers. But then you're also seeing kind of like bigger, more premium things like the Last Game Board and Tilt 5, right? Who are really kind of doing interesting things when it comes to like looking at the board game or game board in new ways. And then what we also saw at that time was more adoption in LBE. So you start seeing more things like Beat Saber in everyday arcades, right? You start seeing more VR experiences in like your main event, in your Urban Air, in your Dave & Buster's. And then COVID hit, right? So just kind of fast forwarding along to where we are now and looking ahead, we obviously saw LBE numbers go down, but what we did see is more VR numbers going up. So people, like when it comes to kids and family, I don't have my headsets at hand here, but you started seeing people like where they maybe had their mobile headsets in the cupboard. They were bringing out their mobile headsets and they were kind of re-engaging with mobile VR that maybe they hadn't in a while. Families, and I'm like, I can raise my hand here, where that may have been on the fence in terms of investing in headsets, right? Like with Quest and Quest 2 coming out, it's like, hey, we can't go to the arcade, but let's bring, the arcade home to us. And I think like during COVID and also, just to keep an eye on are companies like Resolution Games. So like in the middle of COVID, right, they had Cookout. If you guys haven't played that, it's one of our favorites. But Cookout and
I'm writing it down.
And Blast On as well. And so like that's another trend throughout COVID, and I think we're going to continue to see is that kind of VR fitness, not only for just like super like people who are into VR, but like kind of extending that play for kids and families. I mean, even in our kind of home and community, we have our own like leaderboard challenges with different games.
That's awesome.
And then kind of thanks. And then also when we look at kind of play over the last year and current trends that we're seeing, we're looking at things kind of bringing back to LBE. So LBE went down. We're seeing the numbers come back up. And I can't wait to hear what Kelly has to say in a little bit about her experience. But we're definitely seeing a lot of research and data, even released as recently as last week, anticipating LBE ticking back up. One of the areas we're seeing is sort of retailtainment. So like with Brian being at Lego, they just launched their huge experience in New York with loads of interactive and fun play. They've had the Mosaic Maker for a while that they worked with Trigger Global on. There's things like the Make Your Own Fish experience that they have at their headquarters, and a couple of things. But and so Lego, I think from a toy and game, is definitely a leader right now in that retail play space. But I think as stores and people are going out, retailers are looking like, hey, I've got all this real estate. I need to be a little clever. So you're seeing retail locations cutting good deals, being flexible with their renting options. And so I think we're going to see companies like Spree Interactive. We actually work with them at Live Area, but they do free roam VR, and they're in shopping malls in Germany. And so I think we're going to see more of that in other places. And then, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, what you're describing. I mean, and by the way, that's an amazing like summary of the last sort of like 4 years. I feel quite exhausted. The technology is moving so quickly, and like as new technology comes online, it begins to kind of like converge with other technology. It's creating these new types of opportunity, which is so exciting. And those opportunities, some are kind of utility, some are about changing behavior. And I think it's those sort of it's the change of behavior that then triggers a change of expectation for audiences and creates a huge opportunity for kind of brands and organizations and makers generally. I think I want to bring in Ebby here because we've talked about this sort of change of behavior and change of kind of expectation. And Ebby, you're senior engineer on the most, probably the most ubiquitous piece of XR play in the world right now, Pokemon Go. Everyone knows about Pokemon Go, but I think they'll be surprised by the power of it. I'm really interested to kind of get your kind of frontline view of like how are people using Pokemon Go and like what's the kind of transformational power from a kind of behavior perspective and
Yeah, for sure. So kind of talking a little bit about how Val was talking about looking at the game board differently. Pokemon Go and other Niantic games really build off of the idea that the world is a game board. And so when the world's a game board, that means you have to go outside and maybe do some walking. And kind of like to put it in perspective, like I was looking at some stats, and Pokemon Go, since its launch, has had players walk 49 billion kilometers. And to like even think of like, okay, what does that number even mean? I like looked it up, like compared like the Earth's circumference it's about 1.2 million times that. Okay, that's still a really big number. It's like about 64,000 round trips to the moon, which is also a really big number, or about like 65 round trips to Mars, which Mars is really far. And so I think it's really impressive, even still to Pokemon Go, people working on Pokemon Go like me, to see like how much our players interact with the game and how much they're just, out there doing stuff. So like, yeah, like Pokemon Go has had like a big influence on our players. I was reading an article the other day where someone said that they actually got a job while playing Pokemon Go because they had been following some Pokestops and got to like a shopping plaza where there are a lot of now hiring signs. People have gotten married and like met each other because of Pokemon Go. People have improved their mental and physical health just through playing Pokemon Go. Like new bonds and like stronger bonds between family members who play Pokemon Go together. And like, I'm sure like some people have probably seen like in the summer of 2016, like just people gathering in large groups in parks, and like just think of all those social connections that were made then and still are being made today, just because you happen to be standing at the same raid with somebody and like your life has changed from that point on. So that's like kind of ways that we've influenced our players, but in the other direction, our players have also influenced us. Like just straight on Pokemon Go itself, like we've had we listened to our players, and so we've made a lot of like quality of life improvements over the years. People demanded things. We added trading. We added competitive PvP. On Twitter a bunch, and on our social media, people would be like, "Party Hat Wurmple when?" And eventually we made Party Hat Wurmple in the game a real thing. So it's really fun to see like kind of like how the exchange between us as a developer and our players, and like the outcomes that come through that. And then also like during COVID, because there are so many like congregational spaces that were closed, a lot of people like began to kind of double down or like start using Pokemon Go as their way to kind of go outside and like have something to do, because you can't really go to a lot of places that you used to. And in the process, like, even though people are outside, we still wanted to make sure people were doing so safely. So we did increase like our interaction distances in the game so that people could still enjoy the game and be outside and be safe. We also like increased our in-game bonuses to encourage people to go outside. We added some new features like remote raiding and inviting your friends to raids. And last year we made GoFest purely virtual. We canceled our in-person one and made GoFest purely virtual, and that was a huge success. And some of our ticket proceeds went to, like, it was during the summer of where there were a lot of protests because of Black Lives Matter and like, there are a lot of tensions going on. So we donated some of our proceeds to nonprofits that focus on Black communities. And then with the same momentum, started our Black Developers Initiative. And so I think that's like Pokemon Go is not just a game in that sense. We are also like giving back to the community. We're also trying to motivate and inspire other people to make games and develop. So I think like all around, Pokemon Go the game, Pokemon Go the influence, Pokemon Go the inspiration are kind of like our successes are kind of a celebration of the possibilities of like, what does XR mean, and like what does it mean to be a game for change? I think it makes like a big positive impact, like even at a world scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have that was a really nice little overview. I think that's the power of a live game, isn't it? And the dialogue between your players. And you set out with intent, but then you need to listen, and then you need to adapt. I think it's, for me, like Pokemon Go is just such a brilliant demonstration of the power of a new technology to change those behaviors and create new positive behaviors and actually change society in a really positive way on many levels. I thought, the COVID response, I think, was, when you've got a game that's about being outside, and actually being outside is challenging, and you know, some people would consider it to be dangerous. It's like the way you guys responded to that, I thought was fantastic, and actually, you know, it's about the evolution of the game design, and I think it was just done quickly and you know, really successfully. So congratulations to you and the team for that. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, and I mean, not just me. Everyone is playing it, right? They love it. Okay. Let's move on to Kelly. So, Kelly, you're VP of Digital Product Strategy and Partnerships at Disney Parks, and you and your team are working in XR generally to bring the Disney magic to fans and park visitors around the world. You've got such a broad. I mean, I know your job. You've got such a broad remit. Is it even possible for you to summarize your interest in XR and where you see the greatest potential?
Yeah, no, and this has been a great conversation. I already made a lot of notes that I think that, you know, both from Brian and Val and from Ebby, you know, great points on how we think about this space. So, you know, yes, it's a very big job, and Disney's a very big company that has an amazing mission as far as what it's known for. And I won't bore everyone with an entire history of how Disney has established, and especially the parks business, you know, really this evolution of thinking about play and what it means to come together. I always joke that I would be remiss if I didn't mention Walt Disney in every conversation that I have. But, you know, when Walt Disney created Disneyland, he did so with a very specific intention, that it wasn't about parents watching their children play at a playground. It was about their parents playing with their children and having an experience together. So, you know, one of the key parts of what my team is responsible for is looking at the theme parks and looking at the experiences that we build and develop, and how do we think about emerging technologies and the evolution of digital to be able to provide a deepening engagement with what that core intent was for our theme parks. So it really is about walking that line of, you know, and I think, Brian, you hit on this several times about, you know, the physicality and the importance of physicality and touch and being in a real space and in a real environment. And we have the luxury of having, you know, I would say the best theme parks in the world, where we bring people into our stories and connect them to the worlds that they dream to be a part of and the characters they love to interact with. And we don't want to remove them from that, but we want to be able to deepen that connection when we talk about XR specifically, and how AR and VR, be it wherever you are in an environment, but then also everything from wearable technology, how can that deepen the connection so that when you come into our theme parks, you're having a shared experience that brings you deeper into what that story means for you. We talk a lot about the evolution of, you know, kind of agency. And I think a lot of times, as Val gave us a great overview of the space and how it's evolved, you know, I think initially VR was very isolating at times, and it could kind of remove you from an environment, from the people around you. But I'm really excited to see how, really, when we think about the theme parks, our intention is, it's about connection, and it's about agency, and it's about you having a role in your story. But not only, and I think this is where, you know, Abby, I think we've all played Pokemon Go avidly, the connection not only to the unit that you're going with, be it your family or your friends, but the people that are around you, that you're having a connection and a story in a moment that really brings you all together in a moment in time, even if you don't know each other, and even if you're not directly connected to each other. And I think that's really, really powerful. So what my team looks at, again, is how do you blend it? How do you look at these physical environments that are engaging and they're magical and they're amazing? You go through attractions that kind of blow your mind and tell these stories in a new way. But now, how do we put our guests at the center of their own story? So how do we use technology to really allow you to interact with this physical environment, sometimes directly, but also take that story with you, really at the core of thinking about the evolution of kind of your story and how that extends beyond your vacation at the theme parks. And I think what, you know, Phil, you hit on it, and Val hit on it, I think, as well, you know, what this really comes down to, and I think what many folks on this call have had, you know, a key hand in, is how technology shifts, and then when is the right time, be it that the consumers are now demanding that. And part of it is innovating to the point where you're showing possibility that maybe didn't exist before. So you're starting to introduce that, but then being able to really maximize that. So when you think about the shift in the retail space, you know, Disney is a very large company. We have pretty much multiple different types of businesses under one umbrella. So we think about, you know, the theme park, which may be about storytelling, and it might be about experiencing an attraction, meeting a character. There also is a shopping element, and that shopping element takes place not only in our theme parks, but also at your local mall. And so how do we think about, again, extending those connections and deepening the way that we are interacting with our guests, even in a retail environment at their mall? And I think that's where we have a huge amount of opportunity in thinking about the evolution of what play is and making that something that is accessible and relevant, not only when you're at a theme park and maybe, and again, I think Brian hit this really well, we could spend a whole other session on, how play is sometimes compartmentalized to something that only happens at a certain age and then you're done with it. We really want to break that down as well. And it's something that everyone can channel what it felt like to be a kid and to believe in magic. And that can happen in a theme park, but that can also happen out in the real world.
Amazing. So, I mean, one of the things that I'm aware about parks is that, and actually from kind of Walton's the original intent was about trying to use technology to deliver really magical experiences. And where do you sit on that kind of like how visible technology can be? Like, do you have a kind of like a kind of North Star around making visible technology invisible? Like where do you sit on that kind of spectrum?
Yeah, there's a term that we use quite frequently internally that I love, which is called, technology in service of story. And what that really means is that, and I think it is, to your point, Phil, very much the center of what Disney does, which is that we want technology to be invisible. What we want our guests to do, and we probably have all had that moment, right? I've had my own shared moments where I look at something or I experience something and I immediately ask, how did they do that? How was that possible? And that's what we want. We want to have those moments of awe, and we call it surprise and delight. And we want to make sure that we can allow people, again, to step out of the real world in some ways and be really in this moment of fantasy and true magic. And so everything that we do, and even as we think about bringing technology into our theme parks, we always want it to become kind of invisible. We don't want to bring in experiences that require our guests to be looking at their phones constantly and very heads down. We want to bring in technology that allows them to step out of their daily lives, sometimes put the screens away or make those screens as invisible as possible so that you're really stepping into this fantasy world as yourself. And we're really excited kind of where technology is going to make that more possible.
Thanks, Kelly. What I love about Disney parks and the world that you kind of live in is it's a very controlled environment. And I think, as developers, we really like that kind of controlled space. It's designed. There are specific viewpoints that you're looking at. That it is a space that you can count on to stay the same and be kind of be a platform for creating those experiences. Anna, you're working in user experience at Niantic, and you're working in a space that is highly uncontrollable. I wonder if you can talk about the vision and ambition behind Niantic's planet scale ambition.
Yeah, absolutely. So from its inception, Niantic, and as Evie has talked about, Niantic's main goal has been to kind of turn the entire world into a game board. And, at the cornerstone of that has been obviously through exploration of your local environment, your backyard. But even more so than that, it goes into sharing that with a global community. And so regardless of the location that you're at, our goals are in creating new and unique experiences that enhance the world as it exists today, which I personally think is kind of the cornerstone of what XR is trying to do. So obviously that's an incredibly difficult challenge space because, you're not only worrying about individual, player safety within those different types of physical environments, but you also have the unique opportunity of learning about at a country level, cultural norms and societal practices that we have to integrate into our player experiences. And not only that, but on top of all that, adopting new bleeding edge technology. So, from my perspective, that's kind of why I love working at Niantic so much, because I get the unique opportunity of learning from incredibly intelligent people who have kind of, learned through both experience and from their own backgrounds how we can integrate into all those different, cultural norms and societal practices. As a whole, we kind of enable a global player base and are thinking through, not only current devices on mobile platforms, but new devices as well that are kind of the future of this, utopian AR real world ecosystem. Realistically speaking, though, Niantic kind of takes a more grounded approach that, AR headsets aren't yet at the consumer level, the everyday adopter. But we kind of envision this idea that they will be with the advent of kind of multiple companies who are working on that type of hardware right now. Currently we're, pairing with Qualcomm on a reference design. And I actually got the opportunity to bring Pokemon Go to a demo at the Microsoft Ignite conference on their HoloLens 2.
Which I saw that.
Yeah, so our kind of hope is that in the future, we can have the unique opportunity to support multiple devices. Like that has always been the goal, is kind of reaching the player at where, they want to interact with digital content. And obviously, we've spoken on this before a little bit about the concept of player agency. And I think through, the advent of all of this AR headset technology, we want to be able to kind of integrate players from mobile AR and mobile real world gaming into this kind of new and innovative space. And, empower them to kind of engage on multiple platforms in multiple different types of ways. So, as someone who has worked on a couple different platforms now, I actually used to work with Brian at Magic Leap. I kind of have a distinct perspective on the future of these technologies. I do think AR headsets and AR technologies as a whole, as well as VR technologies, are about to see a boom in the next couple of years. We've seen it with, VR in 2017. We saw it with, the advent of mobile smartphones. We saw it with even PCs as well. As these early adopters influence the industry and kind of create this proliferation and this wealth of content, more and more hardware starts appearing. And I think actually the AR industry is starting to come into its own with all of these different headsets and integrations of hardware via VR or mobile. And the goal of Niantic overall is to support those decisions and support those that hardware in any way that we can by providing users with meaningful content, so that in the ideal world we can have an impact on how consumers can have agency over what type of platform they prefer.
Thanks, Ali. It's funny. We'll look back in 5 years and sort of laugh at ourselves, like using phones to look at things through things, like when actually it's just going to become this very kind of invisible experience, and it's just going to become a much more low threshold, much more accessible experience. So listen, I think I've done quite a good job timekeeping. I'm aware we're sort of slightly running out of time. Can I just open it to you guys? Are there questions that you want to ask each other? Or I can jump to audience questions. Go on, Brian. No?
I don't want to put anybody on the spot, I hate to say. Because otherwise I would ding Ali on something.
Oh my goodness. You're welcome to.
Okay.
If you would like.
Is there questions in the chat?
Yeah. So let me just remind people to add questions if they want. There's one question here, which is around beyond escapism and play. What does XR offer as an experience to audiences?
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about it, is that it tends to be less about escapism and more about actual inclusion of your surroundings, about the people around you. I have jokingly said before that we already have a wearable computer, but it's this stupid, it's got the tiniest FOV possible and it takes up a hand, you know what I mean? And like, that sucks. That's a bad wearable computer. And so we already have compute that we want to bring with us, that we have stuff to do with it that's not just play, it's work, it's communication, it's social stuff, it's the whole 9 yards. So like, we just need to make a much better version of a wearable ubiquitous computer, and that's kind of what XR is hoping is getting us in that direction, right? And so it's not just about play, it's more about having that ubiquitous compute and the ability to have real-time feedback for learning, for for work in general, for like remote instruction is probably the biggest XR application currently on the planet, and it has nothing to do with play. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think part of the reason that you hear a lot about play and you see a little bit of games is simply because people let their guard down when it's a game, and they don't think about like, is this going to make me crappy at my job, or is this going to whatever? It's so they can get into it and they can actually just sort of like get a sense for what it is that they're even experiencing. And so it's more like way to get their foot in the door. And it's not so much that we're all hoping to make play the only thing you ever do. It's more that it is a way to engage people with new technology that isn't scary.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I think Brian summarized it really well, honestly. I think that's like the summation of all of that is the ideology that, you know, play has a huge influence on the adoption of new technologies, and even speaking to previous iterations of you know, hardware as a whole, you know, Brick Breaker on BlackBerry, you know, different types of console games on Xbox Live, you know, these are the things that allow people to kind of think bigger and immerse themselves more. And I think that was a great summation of how we can do that.
I have a question for Kelly. I know that you're working on the parks. Is there any thoughts around Disney Plus in my home? Goodness, I would love to see What If extend into my living room.
Well, similar to your opening comment on Lego and secret projects, you know, yeah, we, in all seriousness, I won't say a lot because I won't be allowed to, but you know, it really is, and as I kind of talked about it, you know, the center of everything that we do is about stories. It's about stories, it's about worlds, it's about characters. And we think about that heavily through, again, the lens of the theme parks, which is now I'm taking you into a controlled environment that I can really immerse you in this both physically as well as adding, you know, digital and technology to deepen that connection. But we do know that that's only one way that our guests interact with our stories. And Disney Plus and the fantastic content, I hope everybody's watched Black Widow, you know, is another way. That's kind of one other key touch point in the way that many of our guests learn about or get to know our characters and our stories. And so we do want to be thinking about, again, how can we stay with our guests? And I think Ali hit this a few times, which is this idea of agency, this idea of persistence, that these stories come to life no matter where I am. And that could be how I'm navigating the world in the way that Niantic does so well with Pokemon Go. That can be in a controlled environment like our parks, or it can be within your home. How do these stories come to life? And again, how do we bring you closer to those stories so that you become a part of that? There's a relationship that's developed. And we're very excited about where XR is going. And I think as we talk about adoption, right? And I love the conversation that just happened around, you know, learning and these other ways that are non-escapism, but allow play to become a part of daily life. That is about, you know, how I'm using Zoom to connect with a family member, or how I'm getting on Fortnite to hang out with my friends, which is totally the norm, I guess, now. And there's different ways, again, that behaviors are shifting. How are we now responding to that, knowing that now mass adoption is kind of ready, right? And again, I think, you know, Pokemon's always a great example of really taking something that felt very abstract as AR and made it very real for everyone, and likely audiences and demographics that would have never called themselves a gamer and would have never talked about playing AR, but it became something that was so inclusive and so accessible that it was readily available. So we're really excited, again, to think about our stories across, you know, all of those vectors, be it up environment and where our guests are and where they want those stories to come to life.
Well, and now I'll just jump in there. So I love hearing your perspective, Brian, because I think I have a similar want experience from a Disney perspective. You know, and I know, Kelly, you and I sort of briefly spoke last week, you know, and it's like, for me, it's as a, you know, not as a research nerd or any of that, but just as a pure, you know, consumer fan, right? I want to be able to jump into my Disney Plus experience. I want to be able to go, you know, on my quests in Galaxy's Edge. And then, oh, by the way, when I get to the park, I want to have, like, you know, my own sort of experience served up from me. Like I'm rewarded because I had that experience in Galaxy Quest, or I did that, you know, I viewed that content on Disney Plus. And I'm sure with Disney, we're not too far away from there. But that's kind of like what I see in the very near future.
Yeah, I mean, I as a sort of someone who is not connected to Disney or Lego, like, you know that the living room, the future of the living room is a space which is being kind of like fought over, and there will be, stuff coming to set-top boxes, and there will be more interesting kind of connected experiences that extends the kind of more traditional kind of passive, like lean back experiences that are happening. And so I think what we're describing is just like, technology coming at the right time and just opening up those new possibilities for audiences. And I think it's the question around, like, is it just about escapism or play? It's really, we're talking about opportunities to do like platforms and opportunities to do completely new things. And actually it can be used for anything from education to inspiration to behavior change, education. So I think it's a ripe area for kind of like all possibilities. It's not specifically linked to entertainment, for sure.
I think also, if I can steal a minute,
yeah, of course.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to by being more integrated into the living room is a little bit of a breakdown of the sort of like, it's either aggressively interactive or it's the lean back. Like, I want to see a bit more of the gradient in the middle, in exactly the same way that, like, if I'm in an open office space, I could either be the center of attention or completely unattached, but I can still hear those people, or I just occasionally stick my head up and go no, and then dive back under my desk. You know what I mean? Like I can pop in and out and not feel like there's only one or the other, right? And I think that one of the things that's for me is super awesome is about the thought of like being able to come in and be watching a show and like actually engage with it for 5 minutes while I have the time, and then just walking away when I don't, and it keeps going or it doesn't or whatever. But point being is that we can blur that line just a little bit between quote unquote active and passive interactivity. And that's super exciting for me, because I hear a lot of people say, oh, people want to like relax and lean back and not be so actively thinking. And I'm like, that's because they've never actually been given options where they can like just go in a little bit. They either have to be all in with a 6-axis joystick that's sucking their soul out of their bodies, or they're literally in an IMAX theater and they're not a thing. They're not a part. And like, if they had been given more options in the gradient, I think they'd be more excited about potentially being able to be engaged a bit more than just sitting on the couch.
I agree, Brian. And what was really great is Nickelodeon did some experimenting in that space, right? Like, they had their awards show where you could hold up your phone at key moments and have these like AR experiences, or they did participatory quizzes or engagement. So I think they've done a good job of, like, to your point of like, if I want to engage, if I want to be in the quiz, if I want to augment slime someone in my living room, I can, or I can just see who won the award. That's cool. But yeah, I'm excited about those experiences too.
Well, we're talking about new affordances and new behaviors, and actually the designing for audiences and designing for families and designing for that. So those different types of experiences is kind of what it's all about. So that we've hit time, so I think we'll wrap it here. Can I just thank Ebby, Ali, Brian, Val, and Kelly? Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope the timekeeping was sufficiently sharp. I look forward to connecting with you all offline, and people, if you want to keep chatting, please do. I think this room will stay open for a little bit longer. That's what I know. So goodbye. Games for Change.
Thank you all. Thanks again, Phil, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Thanks for the invite. Love to be here. Thank you.